In this video, we're going to see how to easily make a Retrieval Augmented Generation or RAG agent in n8n. This is when you prompt an LLM and provide it with sources to augment the response and make it more grounded in truth. We're going to use DigitalOcean's Agent Builder that lets us easily build agents and automatically scrape websites to build knowledge bases. We'll scrape DigitalOcean's documentation and use it to make an agent that can automatically answer product questions. We'll then add it to our n8n workflow so that it can automatically handle product questions submitted through our form. And this is only going to take about 10 minutes, so it's really easy to do. This is lesson 5 in our n8n crash course. If you're new to the series, this video will be self-contained, so you don't have to worry about watching any other videos. But if you want more context or just want to learn more about how to use n8n, then go ahead and check out the previous lessons in the course. Alright, so in the last lesson, we learned how to build an automated pipeline that can automatically handle sales inquiries. But those aren't the only type of questions we're going to get through our contact form, so we need to make sure to handle different types of cases. So let's get started building the branch that handles support inquiries. Go to DigitalOcean, click on Agent Platform, and then go to Agent Workspaces. Then create a workspace. A workspace is just a collection of related agents. So I'm going to call this n8n Inquiry Workspace, and you can just click Create Workspace. Now click Create Agent, and we're going to call this n8n Inquiry Agent, and we're going to add agent instructions here. We're going to give it a relatively simple prompt here. So we're going to do act as an advisor who gives advice on how to use DigitalOcean, provide minimal examples with markdown code blocks when relevant, and then absolutely reject unrelated queries of any kind with a simple message like I'm an agent that advises on how to use DigitalOcean. I cannot answer this question. You can now select a model. I'm just going to use the 120 billion parameter open source GPT, and then we're going to use the workspace that we just created. We can add a knowledge base here, but we're going to build that later. So we can just go down and click Create Agent. There are a lot of features available here. So you can do function calling, you can have multi-agent routing, you have guardrails, you have traceability. But what we want here is to build a knowledge base. So I'm going to go back here to the workspace, and then I'm going to go back to the agent platform, and we're going to go over to knowledge bases. So we're going to create a knowledge base. So I'm going to call this n8n Inquiry Agent KB knowledge base. And now we need to select a data source that we're going to load into this knowledge base. So click Select Data Source. And then there are several different options here, and we're going to do a URL for web crawling. If you want to learn more about the features, you can check out my video on that. So I'm going to go to the product home for our documentation and copy the link, and then we're going to paste it in here. So we enter the URL for crawling. So now we need to determine the scope of the crawling. So here we have scoped only crawled the seed URL. So that means only this exact page. So what's seen here is going to get crawled. Then we do URL and all linked pages in path. So here we crawl the URL and then any page that it references that's in this path. So a different path is not valid, but something that's beneath this path is valid. Then we can do URL and all linked pages in the domain. So that's anything in the DigitalOcean domain that's linked. So I'm just going to do pages in the path and then click Add Selected Data Source. And you can add more data sources if you'd like, but I'm just going to add this one. And then we can decide where the knowledge base should live. So I'm just going to put it in an existing OpenSearch database. And now we can scroll down and choose our embedding model. So this is the model that's going to convert our text to meaning. Using a better embedding model will give you richer representations and therefore might make the Retrieval Augmented Generation more accurate, but it's going to be more expensive. So there's a trade-off here. I'm just going to use the largest model here, but you can select the other ones or experiment with them if you'd like. And then I'm going to go down and select a project, and then finally click Create Knowledge Base. So now we can click into our knowledge base and we'll see that it's still indexing. So indexing job in progress. And while this is going, let's go back to our agent and hook it up. So I'm going to go back to the agent workspaces, click on our workspace, and then click on our agent. The agent is still deploying. I'm going to go over to resources and then scroll down to knowledge bases. And we're going to add a knowledge base. So we're going to add our Inquiry Agent KB. So we can add this knowledge base even if it hasn't finished indexing yet. So I'm going to add the knowledge base. And while we're waiting for the knowledge base to finish indexing, I'm going to go here. So our agent has been deployed, and this is the URL we can use to access it. So if I click on this URL, it's going to bring us to automated documentation on how to use the agent. So here we see different endpoints. And we see the chat completions endpoint. We see the request schema, all the different information you can include in the request. And then we see a request sample and a response sample. So if we go here, we can see the path to access this functionality at. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this link, and then we're going to go back to n8n. To call this agent, we're going to use a simple HTTP request. So go ahead and click HTTP request. And this is going to be a post request. Then you can paste in the URL you just copied. Then we can click execute step, and we can see that this request is forbidden. So by default, your agents are going to be private. They're not going to be accessible to the public. You can change that, but what we're going to need to do is create an access key so only this application can communicate with the agent. So go back to your agent platform here, and then inside the page for your agent, go down to settings, and then endpoint access key. So we're going to create a key here, and I'm going to call it n8n inquiry agent, and we're going to click create. We're going to copy this key here, and then we're going to go back to n8n, and we're going to change the authentication to a generic credential type. The generic auth type is going to be bearer auth. That's the type we need to use for our API key. And then we can click create new credential, and we'll call this n8n inquiry agent key and paste that in here. And again, you can define allowed domains if you want to improve security. So we're going to click save here. And now if we execute again, we're going to get bad requests. So this time we're not getting forbidden, but bad requests, which means that we are getting authorized and allowed to access this resource, but we're just not using it in the correct way. So if we go back to our agent page, we can see the payload that we need to send to this. So we're just going to be using the messages parameter, and this is an array of message objects. So this is kind of the standard LLM interface that we're used to. So we're going to toggle this send body node, and then we are just going to pass in the messages parameter. So we have JSON here using the fields below, and then we're just going to paste in our messages. So the two open brackets here and the closed brackets are just to signify that we have a JavaScript expression in between. And then we give the system message, you are a counting bot, and then the user message 1, 2, 3. And if we execute this, we're going to see that the agent is not going to be able to help us. So this is because we set that system prompt in the DigitalOcean dashboard. So what we need to do now is define the role of this agent and its responsibility. So we're going to go back here, and we're going to connect the support inquiry branch of this switch statement to this request. And then we are going to add a set node here. Here I'm creating the product answering system prompt. So I set the system prompt here. And then additionally, we're going to add another set node here. And this is going to define our exception types. So here we define two types of exceptions: exception not related and exception could not answer. And then in the system prompt here, we say that the role of the agent is as a technical support agent for DigitalOcean, and its purpose is to provide accurate, helpful, and safe answers to users' questions only about DigitalOcean. In the instructions, we first tell it to determine if the user query is about DigitalOcean or its products. If it's unrelated, you must ignore all other instructions and respond only with the following in order to raise an exception. So here we access the exception not related error. And then if the question is related, proceed to the next step. We tell the agent to ground its answer and then to formulate responses. And then we provide a series of constraints here. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning of my workflow, and we had this form submission with pinned data, but this was a sales query. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a pass-through node here, and we're going to call this on form submission. Then we're going to define another one, and we're going to make it product related. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and it's going to open up the form. And I've added a simple question here: what HTTP request can I use to list my DigitalOcean droplets with your API? So we're going to submit that, and then we can pin this information so we can keep this pinned. So now we have a sales example and a product example. So we're going to hook that up. And again, we're going to play this, and we're going to need to update the node here. So when we rename this node, it updated all of its references in the other nodes. So we are going to just and we should be good to go. And this is another good reason that we have this kind of interface in the middle here. So these sorts of errors are not going to propagate through your whole workflow if you design in this way. So I'll add a link to the previous lesson where I discussed this if you weren't here for that. So now we can go ahead and again click play, and this time the request is going to be routed along this branch. So now we can see that we've added this exception not related string, and we can finally call our agent. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that knowledge base is finished indexing, and now we can submit this question. Okay, I got this I cannot answer response, so I'm going to go and just remove these agent instructions here because the LLM just might be getting confused with all the role messages and everything, and I'll just say follow instructions. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this for now, just so we can show this example. Now we can go try this again. And we have you are a counting bot 123 and then 456. So now we can call our agent and it is successfully responding. So now let's go ahead and replace this prompt with the actual prompt. So we're going to go here and we're going to replace you are a counting bot and we're going to put in our system prompt. And then we are going to replace the user query with the inquiry. So let's execute this step and see what we get. And here we see the response. So I'm going to copy this and we see if I put that in a markdown previewer, we see we get a curl block and then information about the request. So now that we have the answer to the user's question, we can hook it up to email and we can send the response to the user. So before we do that though, I'm going to add one more LLM call. So we're going to add another gradient node here and I'm going to use Opus again. And we're going to say a user submitted a contact form with the following information. Name, and we're going to go down to the switch statement, add the name, inquiry, and add the inquiry. I'll say here is the requested information, and then we'll add the content here. And then I'll say formulate an email that we can send back to the inquirer with the answer to his or her question. Do not include a preamble and return only the email response itself. Do not include a subject, only the email body. And we can hit execute and we see the email response. So now we can hook that up to our email node. And let's see, we'll add this message as the content and we will send that email. And now if I go back to my email, I can see my response. Thanks for reaching out. To list your DigitalOcean droplets using our API, you can use the following API request. And that's all we have to do to get a product answering agent set up in n8n. Now, email isn't really the best response format for this. For example, if we detect a user is sending in a product question, we could use that to call a webhook, which would automatically open a chatbot, let's say, on the website. So on the user's UI. This means the user wouldn't have to communicate with cumbersome email. And if they have follow-up questions, they could just do it right there in the chat. So this is something that RAG agents are really well suited for, and you can do it in n8n. If you want to see a video on something more complicated like that, then go ahead and leave a comment and we might be able to make that for you. But this is probably the easiest way to set up a RAG agent in n8n. But this isn't the only way to do this. In the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to do this using built-in n8n nodes. Each method has its pros and cons. So jump over to the next video to keep learning.